tonight I'll just recap what we did last time. So if it's going to go forward at all, let's see. So last week we did this about you get to play the part of the Lord in this scenario and determine what you would do for your people. How would you make a proud general of a foreign country's army come to you and serve you forever? And there was a lot of great ideas that people shared about that. And we learned about it. Well, these are all the different scenarios you can use. Anything is at your disposal. And people gave some very good different kinds of answers. The next one was, it was Naaman who came and was influenced by the servant girl who basically worked for him and found out about this prophet in Israel and came to his king, who wrote a letter to the Israeli king, who tore his clothes and said, "Oh my goodness, he wants to make war with me." And the prophet sent the Israeli king a note saying, "Send him to me." So they did. And he sent out a servant Gehazi to tell him to go bathe 7 times in the Jordan River. And then he balked at that. And the servants turned his mind around and he did what he was supposed to do. And he was cured. So it was a major miracle. At the end of it, we saw God's wisdom and all that he did. Because before he came, the Jordan River wasn't good enough to bathe in. By the time Naaman left, he brought back as much earth from Israel as he could so he could worship on that ground. So tonight, we'll start off with mystery scenario number 10. Again, you get to play the part of the Lord in this scenario and determine what you would do for your people. You want to show your greatness to a country that has been heavily oppressed your people for hundreds of years, and let your people walk out with all the wealth of the land while also destroying the nation. What would you do? And again, I've tried to scrub the stories. I know people figure it out, and your job is not to reveal what the Bible story is, but to tell us what you would do to fix the problem. So you want to show your greatness to a country that has heavily oppressed your people for hundreds of years, and let your people walk out with the wealth of the land while also destroying the nation. So I'll open it up. Can everybody talk? So I'm going to unmute everybody so you can speak. And you have everything at your scenario. You can use tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, fire, volcanoes, still small voice, honey in a mouse trap, whatever you want. I could hear Nicholas for a second.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you go back to the other slide just so we can read it again?
Yep.
I was like most of us, we can probably figure out what the story is supposed to be, but I think some way to really dramatically affect a country, whether it be hundreds or thousands of years ago or today, is do something drought related or something with the food supply, which dramatically affects everybody, and have something similar to the story that this is drawn from, that basically says if you don't let these people leave your country peacefully with all your money, this drought will continue, because food is the #1 essential item for anybody.
Yeah, and it is. And I was thinking while you were talking about that, all the pogroms of the Russians against the Jews for hundreds of years, they basically as a nation were cursed over and over again in exactly the ways you're talking about, with food shortages and drought and all kinds of problems. So that's a very that's hitting it right very close to the heart when you're talking about taking away people's food supply, because somebody was telling me, they were like, we're only 9 days away from total anarchy, and that's if we run out of food. So you're right. And in the scenario we're dealing with right now, I'm sure you've all heard in the news how many thousands of gallons of milk have been wasted and thrown away, how many thousands of chickens have been killed and just left. Lots of those kinds of scenarios, and the fact that food prices are going to go way up because there aren't enough people to pick it or do the work. So, anybody else? Well, I'm sure you've guessed it. If I can get my mouse to move forward, it's the 10 plagues. God magnified himself to reveal to his people, to know him well. He chose a shepherd, Moses, his brother, and 10 disasters to devastate a rich and powerful country and bring it to its knees, Egypt, and crush the pride of its ruler, Pharaoh. And this became legendary even among all the nations that Israel started to inhabit when they came into the land. Jericho had heard about it, Ai had heard about it, all these other cities in Canaan heard about what happened down in Egypt. But subtly, what are all 10 of these plagues supposed to destroy ideologically? The blood, the frogs, the gnats, the flies, the disease and
Are
livestock.
you talking about their gods?
Yes, yes, that's it. So they had over 4,300 gods, and they were in charge of everything known from soup to nuts. So what's interesting about this is that with these 10 plagues, the majority of those false gods were eviscerated, liquidated, terminated. So it's a brilliant scheme. It accomplishes so much in so little time. And the first three are obviously felt by just the Jews, and then the Jews and the Egyptians. But then after that, the last seven, I believe, they do not feel the impact of. So they're all recorded here as to where they fall within the Bible. So this is what I think is interesting about the scenario. So Abraham's a very faithful man. He does things God's way. God promises him everything because of his sacrifice of Isaac. And one of the strangest ones is Genesis chapter 15, because in that chapter, he reveals to him what's going to happen. So we're going to read it. But God promised to Abraham when he parted the animals and a smoldering fire pot passed between the cleaved pieces, that this would happen, and for 430 years his people would be slaves in a foreign country. Now when it came true, his people were brought back on the very day. So let's read that. It's Genesis chapter 15, verses 10 through 20. Let's see, who's up there? Who's Stephen's iPad?
That's Nijme.
Nishmi, you want to read it?
Sure. I just have to
Great.
get.
Thank you. We got a Canadian on board.
Yeah, hang on. Genesis 15, you said?
Yeah, and it starts at verse 10. It goes to verse
Yeah.
20.
Okay, just give me a second.
Sure.
Okay, here I am. Hang on.
So you'll all be thinking about the significance of why these animals are cut in two. Why are they in the order that they're in? And why does this fire pot pass between them? What is the spiritual significance?
Okay, hang on. Genesis 15, 10 to 20. Here it goes. But you will go to your father in peace, and you will, am I reading the right thing?
Are you in Genesis
No.
15?
Yeah, chapter 15, yes. Okay, let me try again. 10, I'm reading the wrong thing. Hang on. He bought him all all of these and divided them in the middle and laid each half opposite the other. But he didn't divide the birds. The birds of prey came down on the. What's going on? Do I keep reading?
Yeah, you keep reading to verse 20.
Okay, he didn't divide the birds. The birds of prey came down on the carcasses and Abraham drove them away. When the sun was gone down, a deep sleep fell on Abram. Now terror and great darkness fell on him. He said to Abram, know for sure that your seed will live as foreigners in the land that is not theirs and will serve them. They will afflict them 400 years. I will also judge that nation whom they will serve. Afterward, they will come out with great wealth, but you will go to your fathers in peace. You will be buried in a good old age. In the fourth generation, they will come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet full. It came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. In that day, Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your seed I will give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Kadomites and the Hittites, the Perizzite and the Ramhims, the Amorites and the Canaanites, the Girgashites and the Jebusites.
So all this land is from the Nile River all the way to the Euphrates, that huge swath of land. And he's talking about all the nations that are inhabiting it right now. But I mean, you think about this, God comes to you and he says, I'm making a covenant with you that your people, your descendants are going to be slaves in a foreign land for 430 years. But in the fourth generation, I'll bring them back. I would be so baffled by that. I would think, what in the world did I do wrong that my descendants are going to be enslaved for 430 years? But there was a purpose to it, because they're basically waiting until the adulteries or the iniquities of the nations that God was going to drive out reached the full measure so they could be thrown out. So the Kenites, I think, were up near where Dan was. I don't know where the Kenizzites or Kadonites were. The Hittites were all over the place. Remember the Girgashites? Was that the one that deceived themselves and said the Gibeonites? They came from, they're left off this list. The Gibeonites made the big deception with Joshua and acted like they'd come from a far place with moldy bread and worn out sandals and old wineskins. So they stayed. But it's very, very interesting, the smoking pot. Now, there are several different animals here before verse 10. He says, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, and a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So I kind of just think these are animal sacrifices that would have happened later on in history when they brought these animals before the Lord. But he divides them in half, and then this torch passes through. I tried to find a good image of it, and it was just really, really difficult to find one. But the man who made Egypt a rich country was Joseph. He basically was the one who instituted that a fifth or 20% of everything in the land was going to go to Pharaoh. And that was when the latter part of the famine had happened, and they had sold their crops, their people, their land, and everything to Joseph. And so he gave them seed, and he said basically a fifth of everything you make comes to Pharaoh. So that's twice as much as God takes with the 10% thing. So it's very, very interesting how this all was worked out. Okay, our next scenario is scenario number 11. Again, you are to play the part of the Lord in this scenario and determine what you would do for your people. You're going to send your people into captivity, and they will have to endure brutal siege beforehand. How would you relate this calamity to your people via a prophet? So it's hard to scrub these stories enough to you. I could say, your people are going away for an extended vacation. But there's going to be a siege. So I'll let you read it a couple more times, and then you can use any scenario you want to make this manifest.
Middle school sports could get dumped, okay?
Hey, Lou. All right. So if you all want to, just tell me what you think. What scenario you would use to tell your people that they're going to have to endure a siege before they are taken captive. Patsy, you want to answer?
Can I say something?
I'm still
Sure.
thinking.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm thinking that maybe I could, if I were God, I would send a person in to my people, and I would act out the things that I was going to do before them, so they would try to understand. I would act it out in parables, maybe lay on the floor, do things that are strange, that would make them see that there's going to be calamity for them in the place I'm going to send them into captivity.
That's excellent, and you're striking very close to the heart of the matter. So that's what the Lord did, was he used a specific prophet to carry out his scenario and reenact exactly what was going to happen to them. Usually we have reenactors that portray history. This is the first person I know that's reenacting the future. So it's very interesting. You've got all these different options, and this is it. It's an almost unbelievable allegory of the siege of the captivity prediction. Ezekiel is told he must lie bound on his side for 390 days for Israel and 40 days for Judah, eating only bread cooked over human excrement. And that's where we get this idea of Ezekiel 4:9 bread, and the clay tablet that had the drawing of the city on it from this chapter, which is pretty unbelievable. Now, can you think about how uncomfortable it would have been to lay on one side for all that time? And also, everybody passes by you while you're lying there. And what do you say to them? You know, this is what's coming to you. Yeah, so you coming soon to a town near you. So it's pretty amazing that this is what God chooses to do, that he's going to lay on aside a day for a year for each of the two countries. So there's a lot of great drawings of this and illustrations. So the wisdom is that first Ezekiel is told to make a drawing of a model of the city of Jerusalem in clay, and then laid siege ramps against it. It's almost like what children would do, right? They make this in the dirt, they make a little fort, and then they have their little men go in and attack. And that's literally what he's doing here in Ezekiel chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. So let's read that real quick, and if everybody can turn to Ezekiel chapter 4, we're going to look at verses 1 through 17. So who would like to read? We got lots of people on tonight. Frank, can you read it? You gotta mute Frank. Okay, I'll pick Roger. Roger, have you got Ezekiel 4?
All right, I just had to get unmuted. Ezekiel 1 through 17.
Yes, sir.
Thou also, son of man, take thee a tile and lay it before thee, and portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem, and lay siege against it, and build a fort against it, and cast a mount against it. Set the camp also against it, and set battering rams against it round about. Moreover, take thou unto thee an iron pan, and set it on a wall of iron between thee and the city, and set thy face against it, and it shall be besieged, and thou shalt lay siege against it. This shall be a sign to the house of Israel.
So stop there for 1 second.
All right.
What do you think this iron pan means between Ezekiel and this miniature city of Jerusalem and the siege that goes on? Anybody can answer the question, not just Roger. I don't know if I'm right on this, but I think that it's an allegory, right? We know that he's made a model of the city. He's set it up. He's made siege ramps. He's made battering rams. He's made all of this to scale so that the people who are passing by will see it. So if Ezekiel is playing the part of God and he's revealing this, then the iron pan to me is God's indifference towards their prayers, that he is so done with the way they've behaved that literally there is an iron wall between he and this city. That's just something to think about. I don't say that's the absolute interpretation, but I think it's something to consider, because he's done all these things out of symbology of what God is going to do to Jerusalem. And he's playing the role of the Lord in this with this miniature little city and building all these models that are to scale to show everybody who passes by, this is what is a future forecast of what's going to happen to the city. You know, our weathermen are never right, and they're only predicting a day ahead. He's predicting a much longer period of time. So it's fascinating to me that this illustration happens the way that it does. And even
Joe?
the way that he eats, yes.
The one thing that jumped into my head almost immediately, the use of the word iron, what came to my mind in Revelations, and I can't think of the exact verse, maybe it's around chapter 12 or 13, a reference to Christ, that he would rule with an iron scepter.
Yes.
Now that's kind of a odd thing. Most scepters, I don't think, are iron. They're made of gold or silver or ivory, things of that nature. But it said that Christ would rule with an iron scepter. And when you said the word indifference, that just jumped right in my head. Why would he rule the kingdom of God with an iron scepter, unless it is because of the indifference of the world that is resisting him?
Yeah.
Until he has put that down through his 1,000-year reign. Just a thought jumped right in my head. So,
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Joe,
Yes, go ahead, Betty.
I was also thinking that when I think of an iron pan, I think of something that's hot, very hot, to the touch. And so I sort of equate that iron pan that is set upon the wall between themselves and the city is God's anger and wrath that is setting, making a difference between the Jews and sort of their city. He's showing them that he's very angry with them, and therefore that's what the iron pot is going to represent.
Yeah, I think so too. And he also says in Deuteronomy, I think it's 28, that he says the sky will become bronze above you and the earth become iron beneath you. Meaning that that's going to be the hardness of the earth, and there's not going to be any rain. So they've already had those problems. But I just really think it's interesting because he says very clearly, take an iron plate and set it up as an iron wall between yourself and the city. Turn your face towards it. So he's looking at this iron plate the whole time, so that when it is under siege and besieged it, then it'll be a sign to the house of Israel. So he's basically turning his face kind of away. Yes.
So
Walter speaking.
what if the iron cane represents the unconquerable army set between him and the people?
It could, but he's already making these siege ramps and these little models that are all around it.
Because they represent the army, the people.
Yeah.
You cannot get through this iron pot.
Yeah,
No,
it's an idea. It's a good idea. I mean, there's no one interpretation on this. I just wanted to sort of read through it so we can consider all the ways that God's a God of mysterious ways, and the way he's informing his people of what's going to happen is just so unique. It's very creative, I think. But anyway, go ahead, Roger, and keep reading.
all right, I think I'm on verse 5? I kind of lost my.
You finish with the iron curtain, iron wall. You're starting
Okay,
with verse
4. Okay. Lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon it. Thou shalt bear their iniquity. For I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days, so shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. Therefore, thou shalt set thy face towards the siege of Jerusalem, and thine arm shall be uncovered, and thou shalt prophesy against it. And behold, I will lay bands upon thee, and thou shalt not turn thee from one side to the other, till thou hast ended the days of thy siege. Take thou also unto thee wheat, barley, and beans, and lentils, and millet, and fitches, and put them in one vessel, and make thee bread thereof, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon thy side. 390 days shalt thou eat thereof. And thy meat, which thou shalt eat, shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day. From time to time shalt thou eat it. Thou shalt drink also water by measure, a sixth part of a hin. From time to time shalt thou drink. And thou shalt eat it as barley cakes, and thou shalt bake it with dung that cometh out of man in their sight. And the Lord said, even thus shalt the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, whither I have driven them. Then said I, Lord God, behold, my soul hath not been polluted. For from my youth even till now have I not eaten of that which dieth of itself, or is torn in pieces, neither came there abominable flesh into my mouth. Then he said unto me, lo, I have given thee cow's dung for man's dung, and thou shalt prepare thy bread therewith. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, behold, I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem, and they shall eat the bread by weight, and with care, and they shall drink water by measure, and with astonishment, that they may want bread and water, and be astonished one with another, and consume away in their iniquity.
So that's up there, or you're already finished?
Yep, I'm done.
Okay, so much richness in all of this. So he's not only mirroring how long they're going to be in the situation by lying on his side. He's built a model city. He's built siege ramps. He's built a fort. He built the battering rams, the whole 9 yards. So every time they pass by, they have to look at this. And him with this iron plate between he and the city. So what's interesting is that this food that he's eating is defiled. The point is, you're going to eat defilement because you loved it so much in my holy land that I'm going to send you to the banquet yourself, and you can go eat this food in a foreign land, and you won't be able to eat kosher, and you won't be able to keep my law because you're going to be defiled among them for all this time. Now let's do some math and see another miracle that comes out of this. How much is 40 plus 390?
430.
430 years. How long did the Jews spend in Egypt according to the promise in Genesis chapter 15?
430 years.
So it's exactly the same amount of time, 430 years altogether. The same situation that happened to them in Egypt is happening again. So they received the law during that time after the 430 years, and they were wandering around for 40 years afterwards. What did the Jews say about the time that they were in Babylon? About their books, about their Torah, about their law, about their writings? Anyone can answer. They think of it as their Renaissance. All of the books were codified and then they were made perfect. And Frank, you can back me up on that if you want to, or say something different. But a lot of the books were written and codified and protected during the time that they were in Babylon. So there's just so much to this story that's unbelievable. The way that he has to eat the food, laying down on the side, the model of the city, what the iron wall represents, the hardness of God's heart all over them because they had been rebelling for such a long time. So I calculated it up that between all the major prophets and minor prophets, there's almost 285 years invested in warning them. 285 years. Jonah goes to Nineveh 3 days walking across, and he basically has decided he's not gonna. They all repented, from the cow to the king. They were wearing sackcloth and ashes and changed. There's just a lot to this that's pretty remarkable. So it's also brought up in Hebrews, and I think this is so powerful, this little part that I think really talks about Elijah and many of the other major prophets that forecast and foretold the captivity of the Jews in a foreign land in Babylon for 430 years, same amount of time as they spent in Egypt. So altogether, it adds up to 860 years, which is remarkable. So who would like to read this passage of Hebrews 11? I got Horst Trustead online up at the top. The WW at the top. Oh, that's you, Walter Wards. I'm sorry. How about Gray?
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. Well, Patsy, would you like to read this?
Sure, I'll read it.
Okay.
Who by Hebrews
It's right on the screen.
11:33.
Yeah, it's right on the screen too.
Yeah, I'm gonna read it off the screen. Who by faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, but shut the mouths of lions, quenched the raging of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, gained strength after being weak, became mighty in battle, and put foreign armies to fight. Women received their dead, they were raised to life again. Some men were tortured, not accepting release, so that they might gain a better resurrection. And others experienced mocking and scourging, as well as bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sewed in two, they died by the sword, they wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and on mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these were approved through their faith, but they did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, so that we would be made perfect without us. So that we would not be made perfect without us. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for reading that. I appreciate it. So there's subtle clues all through here of different people from the Bible who are alluded to but not put outright. So what of this from 33 to 40 do you think applies to Elijah? Sorry, to Ezekiel, excuse me. Well, I'll help you out. I'm pretty sure he was mocked in verse 36 the whole time this was going on. He was certainly bound to the ground. He couldn't get up. We'll find that out later. And it was a sort of imprisonment for 390 days and 40 days on the other side. He was certainly destitute, afflicted, and mistreated. And many of the other things in this passage are quite true about him. But I put here a picture of the siege of them coming through to Jerusalem in 586 BC, sorry, 568 BC, I think. So it's just extraordinary, the mystery of God revealed in this story. This is the 11th out of 12. Is there any other comments anybody had on this one? Oh, they're so quiet.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Just kind of a side note, because it's right in the middle of it, of all of these things, where, let's see, what verse is it? I think it's 35, 35, the last line. Now, this is halfway through everything, these terrible things. It said that they might gain a better resurrection. We can read right over that and not realize the significance of what that means. Because we know when the resurrection comes, everybody will be resurrected. That is responsible to the judgment seat of Christ. And you might think, can there be a bad resurrection? It is if you're raised to go back into the grave again, because they work for a better resurrection, which means resurrection is a two-step process. There's coming out of the ground, raised to life, and then there's being raised to eternal life. And this is what this is saying, because it shows that they were trying to not just be resurrected, but to be resurrected to eternal life in that day. Just like when Martha said to Jesus, I know that, Lazarus will rise again in the last day. But that phrase, better resurrection, there's a very big story in that. And it's interesting. I didn't notice it until you had it laid out on the screen like this. I was right dead center of all these things. So it's an important lesson that's sort of woven into this, is the better resurrection, not just resurrection.
And
I just throw that out. I mean, it might be not. Go ahead.
So Daniel, Ezekiel, and Isaiah and Jeremiah are very much like the four faces of the seraphim, right? The face of the man, the ox, the eagle, and the lion. And they also correspond to the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew is the lion, I believe. Mark is the ox. Luke is the man, and John is the eagle. And from this passage, we know that the one sawn in two was Isaiah at the end of his life. That was how he met his end. And the ones we talk about, the prophets who lived in caves, you remember Obadiah was feeding 2 different caves that were filled with 50 of the prophets of the Lord each when Elijah went to go see him. So it's pretty amazing how much is captured in chapter 11. It's quite extraordinary. So there's just so much beauty and mystery that's revealed when God sends Ezekiel to do this. And we can take it as something that's, just part of the story, but there's so much majesty behind it. So this is our last scenario. Again, you get to play the part of the Lord and determine what you would do for your people. Your people have a wicked monarch ruling over them, constantly leading them into adultery. How would you prove your power and sovereignty over all through your prophet? So your people have a wicked monarch ruling over your people, constantly leading them into idolatry. How would you prove your power and sovereignty over all through your prophet? And you don't have to guess the story again. You can just come up with your own scenario. So.
Can you hear me, Joe?
Yes, I can hear you, Helen.
Well, I didn't think you could earlier.
I couldn't because I was asking Frank to read. I guess it was you.
Yeah. I just think I would have a lot of plagues on him, on the monarch.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting idea. You could give him all kinds of diseases and cause all kinds of problems. And I think that happened to several of the kings, actually. King Asa, I think, was damaged in his feet and he couldn't serve anymore. And another one was stricken with leprosy when he went into the temple.
Jeroboam didn't, we covered it maybe a few months back, Jeroboam, when his hand was withered.
That's true.
Was it Jeroboam?
Yeah.
And then he asked to have it restored, and
Yes.
he saw the power right there, but yet he still didn't turn.
He still didn't, but you get to use anything you want. You can,
That's your prophet.
yeah, so you got a prophet and you can use them however you want, but you're just gonna show the monarch and show the people your power. And you can use anything you want.
How about I give my prophet the power to call down fire and tell him, I'm more powerful than you and your fake gods you've got.
Well, you're striking too close to the heart of it, so we're gonna have to move on. I try to scrub these stories, but it doesn't do any good at all. You guys are too brilliant.
What God does he want to do?
Okay, mystery revealed. God accomplished this massive national contest between the false god of Baal and the God of Israel in 1 Kings chapter 18, where Elijah brings all 450 prophets of Baal to Mount Carmel and proves that Baal is powerless and God of Israel is almighty. So this is a showdown at high noon on a grand scale. I mean, they start first. They're allowed to pick the wood, to pick the animal, and build the altar and all this stuff. And they take almost the whole day, dancing around, cutting themselves. And what I love is that Elijah actually gets to be moculatory. As though perhaps he's on vacation, perhaps he's asleep, perhaps he's visiting a foreign country. So it's awesome. I mean, he's very mocking, and it's unbelievable that the people of Israel, who are supposed to be enlightened and have received the law, have actually gotten to the place where they are willing to cut themselves and actually believe this God is listening, the Baals. So it's pretty amazing. And he does this on such a grand scale because all during King Ahab and Jezebel's reign, they had been bringing in prophets of Baal, importing them from other countries, and protecting them, giving them the money that would have gone to the Levites, right? So what's happened with the Levites and the prophets in that? We just went over this in Hebrews chapter 11. Helen? Betty?
I'm not hearing half what's being said. It's garbled.
Well, they were all hiding in caves. So Obadiah was feeding them, but they were living in caves. That's how they survived the reign of King Ahab and Jezebel. That's how bad things were. Can you imagine believers having to hide in caves and be fed by somebody who was like a courier to bring us food every now and again? Anyway, so God's wisdom revealed. After 3 years of famine, Ahab still had not changed his heart, and God stepped in and told Elijah to confront him. Up until now, Ahab had spared no expense in tracking down Elijah from every country he went about and made them swear he was not there. Let's just read that because it's so entertaining to me. And he's basically saying this, he wanted to make sure this was never going to happen. Actually, let's read verse 1 all the way to 19. Betty and Eb, can you split that up and read about 9?
Abe's not here right now. He's going to make the clock knock dong.
Oh, okay.
I'll start out though. 18. Where do you want me to start?
Verse 1.
Okay. And it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go show thyself unto Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. And Elijah went to show himself unto Ahab, and there was a sore famine in Samaria. And Ahab called Obadiah, which was the governor of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, for it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. And Ahab said unto Obadiah, Go into the land, unto all fountains of the water, and to all brooks. Peradventure we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive, that we lose not all the beasts. So they divided the land between them to pass throughout it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another by himself. And as Obadiah was in the way, behold, Elijah met him, and he knew him, and fell on his face, and said, Art thou that, my lord Elijah? And he answered him, and I am. Go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And he said, What have I sinned, that thou wouldest deliver thy servant into the hand of Ahab to slay me? As thy Lord thy God liveth, there is no nation nor our kingdom, whether my Lord hath not sent to seek thee. And when they say he is not there, he took an oath of the kingdom and nation that they found thee not. And
Isn't
now
that
thou
amazing?
sayest, okay,
Isn't that, no, you don't have to stop there, but I just want to say, isn't that amazing? Ahab went to that extent. He sent emissaries to every single nation around them and then made their king swear that Elijah wasn't there. And I just think that's hysterical because it was within his own kingdom and he never found out. It's just like Saul trying to track David down in the wilderness for 7 or 8 long years and he couldn't find him. So when God wants something to be hidden, he's going to keep it hidden. When he wants it revealed, it'll be revealed. So it's just so powerful. So if you want to keep, you or Ed can keep reading if you want to.
was on 12.
I believe so.
And it shall come to pass as soon as I am gone from thee, that the Spirit of the Lord shall carry thee whither I know not. And so when I come and tell Ahab, and he cannot find thee, he shall slay me. But I, thy servant, fear the Lord from my youth. Was it not told my Lord what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophet by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. And now thou sayest, go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here, and he shall slay me. And Elijah said, as the Lord hosts liveth, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself unto him today. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah.
Excellent. So did you read through 19?
No, I stopped at 15. You want me to go to 19?
Yeah, if Eb could read a little bit, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
he's back now.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're back, Eb.
So where were you?
I'm 16.
So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. And it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said unto him, art thou he that troubleth Israel? And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, if that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Balaam. Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophet of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which ate of Jezebel's table.
Excellent. So, unbelievably, Ahab doesn't kill him right then and there. Instead, he takes his invitation and hands it out to the 400 prophets of Asherah, the 450 prophets of Baal, which equals 850. And that's, they've been feeding all these people instead of the 100 prophets of the Lord that have been hiding in 2 caves and have been living off bread and water that Obadiah fed them. So it's 8.5 times what they would have had from the prophets of the Lord. I just think that's pretty amazing, the ratio. So this huge event does not just end one thing, it ends 2 things, okay? So he brings them up to Mount Carmel, all the people come up, they dance around and see this thing going on all day long. It takes the entire day because they can't get any response out of Baal or Asherah. So then he calls down fire out of heaven, it destroys everything, including lifting up the water, the stones, it's all gone, it's all consumed. And then he convinces the people to kill all these prophets of Baal and Asherah. So basically at the end of it, I'm assuming 850 people die. And then it's also the end of the famine. And Elijah prays that it will rain again. And he sees this cloud the size of a fist and it becomes bigger. And he runs and Ahab takes his chariot and goes home. So it's pretty amazing what happens in the story. So just a lot to be thinking about. What I love about it is this passage, once on Mount Carmel, Elijah throws down the gauntlet and tells the people to stop wavering from the God of Baal, and to prove they are just sheep following a maniacal king and queen, they are silent. Then Elijah challenges the validity of their God's deity and sets up 2 bulls and altars and tells them to call on Baal for fire. He then taunts them, and there is no answer. Perhaps he was asleep, on vacation, busy, or at thought. In the final showdown, they resort to cutting themselves, and nothing happens. Then he makes his altar, places a bull on it, douses it with 3 times with water. Then he prays that God will send a fire from heaven that burns everything into a grand conflagration. The people constantly confess that Yahweh is the real God. Finally confess. Elijah calls for the death of the prophets. They kill them in Kishon, which I believe this is where they were. And Elijah, after purifying the land of idolatry, calls for rain and dismisses King Ahab. So amazing that Ahab lived through this, but anyway, they are literally thrown off a cliff at the end of all this. So,
Job, one big thing about this story is that Baal is the god of the dew and the rain, and then Asherah, she's this, this kind of wooden pole that's stuck up, and all this stuff was just terrible things going on, around these Asherah poles. So this really is a story of showing that God is the God of the rain and the dew and the weather. And then, it all ties in with that he is the great God and their gods are false gods. So the story of Baal with this rain is a big connection,
it is, and the despicableness of what the people got into as a result of worshiping Baal and Asherah. What's interesting is you go to the Virginia Fine Arts Museum and go to the antiquity section in Babylon, and they have statues of Baal and Asherah right inside the museum.
Wow.
So even here in Richmond, Virginia, you can go see what they looked like. They're not much. But anyway, it's just an incredible showdown that they have to keep going through. And that's why I like today. It just blows my mind that there's so much myth that's creeping back into a society that was once enlightened. And, people now believe in evolution as opposed to creation. They now believe in a flat earth as opposed to the real earth. They now don't believe we really landed on the moon or half the stuff. Not that I want to go down all that way, but you can see it only takes a very little amount of time for all the knowledge and wisdom to be washed away. And it takes multiple generations to get it back. Hundreds of years. So this was a really powerful one. So I don't know if you all have ever been to my house, but I've played the game Mafia, but I did this with kids. It's called The Shepherd and the Wolf. And basically I hand out these cards and the rest of them are just face cards. And the game is a game of deduction to discover which you can find out the truth. And they have to get rid of the evil in their community, and they only win if everybody works together to do it. So they're given the card. The shepherd is the king, the protector is the queen, and the wolf is the joker. But they're all giving it silently, and nobody knows who anybody is, and they don't reveal their identity. So anyway, it's really fun because the town is actually your ecclesia, and you got to figure out who the wolf is or whatnot. So I did that with kids, and it was really interesting. I also want to just cover this in the last couple minutes, which is, asking the right questions. Do we believe in a set of standards of truth that you live by? Have they been tested in your beliefs and been able to defend them? Have you questioned or doubted what you believe? Are you convinced of what you believe by trials, temptations, or by proving to yourself what is true? So I'll give this little philosophy over here to the right-hand side. It's just a sketch to give us like a general idea of where people are. Everybody's on a different spiritual journey. They're on different stages of their spiritual journey, but you really need to know where they are so that you can understand how to communicate with them. So I'm going to talk about the first one, which is a black hole. Those are people who believe in nothing more than themselves. They have no creed that they live by or personal beliefs. They just they're an entity unto themselves. They don't believe in anything, and nothing or anyone is good enough to believe in. 2 is spoon-fed believers, and that could apply to Muslim, Islam, Christian, Jewish. It doesn't really matter. There are people who have adopted a set of beliefs as they are, but they're untested and untried, and they don't even attempt to figure out if it is the truth or not the truth. They're just going to swallow it whole. 3 is where most of us are, which is wrestling. We're the ones who are questioning what we believe, sometimes doubting, sometimes being tested on their faith. I think all of us go through stage 3 most of our lives. And then at some point, we get to number 4, which is being a confirmed believer, because you've proved to yourself what you believe, or you're convinced of it through faith, and you own it because of all the trials and temptations that you survived in your life. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but I try to put the world in 4 little baskets if I can, and say, where are the, I met a stranger today, I talked with them, and I found out this is where they are right now. They're at stage 2. They've, adopted all these beliefs, but they're not tested, they're not tried, they haven't made it their own yet. 3 is where most, I think, believers that I know generally are, and people who are more advanced in their spiritual lives, like Betty and Eb and Helen and Frank and many others, or Martha. You're confirmed because you've been through those trials and temptations. And there's a big dividing line between the 2. So that's why I just wanted to sort of throw this out and get your guys' ideas on them. And there was crickets. Do you want to say anything, Betty and Ed?
So
Yes.
I think we could say that there are times where we probably might fit into all 4 stages. I think that there are a lot of times where, as believers, we want to be number 4 all the time, because that's the ultimate goal that tries to their faith, their conviction, and their faith to own it. But I think that owning it means that you're talking about it by your belief and by your actions, that you own it. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that because it may come across at times of maybe being over zealous about what you believe. But I think that Christadelphians, and as the fact that we're so blessed with the power of the truth, that we should be more like 4 than number 1, 2, or 3. But just, like you threw out the question, and I think everybody online, they're very mature in the scriptures, but yet still we're all very afraid to say what we really are thinking in our mind. And we don't want to say, well, I question things, I doubt things, my faith isn't tested, because then somebody might get on the phone and say, wow, guess what Nijme said tonight? She says her faith is wavering. Or guess what Nijme said tonight? She thinks her faith is so strong. I don't even know if I can hang out with her because I'm feeling so down and out. So you see what I'm saying? We all go through those stages, and it's very difficult to really be honest and say how we truly feel, because it might put us in a vulnerable position with our brothers and sisters in the Lord.
I totally get that. I think this is a life journey that most of us do go through. And the refinement is by the difficulties that we go through and becoming perfected in our faith. I certainly don't enjoy trials or tribulations at all. but I'm perfectly willing to learn from others. It's just so difficult and painful, but I just wanted to share that with you. And lastly, this is everything we covered of the 12 different mysterious ways: the Tower of Babel, Jeremiah buying a field, Samson falling in love with Philistine women, the lion that killed Ahab, being fed by ravens and widows, shipwrecked on Malta, the ark among the Philistines, the prophet and the prostitute, the prophet, the foreign officer, and the servant girl, which was the story of Naaman, the Egyptian plagues, and Ezekiel doing hard time on the ground with hard bread, and then the contest between Elijah and the false prophets of Baal. So these are just a sampling of what we could talk about, because God is constantly working in mysterious ways to bring about his salvation. I just think it's a lot of fun to get our brains jump started on this, and you can share with other people what a miraculous thing it is that God chose to do this or he chose to do that. It can be very, very powerful and revealing. So we'll stop with these last two slides. Let me see who I have. Martha, can you read this?
Yeah. Read which? The summary?
The
Is that what you're
Isaiah
asking?
45, 14 through 8.
Okay. All right. Now I see it. God alone is a savior. This is what the Lord says. The products of Egypt and the merchandise of Cush and the Sabians, men of stature, will come over to you and will be yours. They will follow you. They will come over in chains and bow down to you. They will confess to you, God is indeed with you, and there is no other God. Yes, you are a God who hides himself. God it is Savior. All of them are put to shame, even humiliated. The makers of idols go in humiliation together. Israel will be saved by the Lord with an everlasting salvation. It will not be put to shame or humiliated for all eternity. For this is what the Lord says. God is the creator of the heavens. He formed the earth and made it. He established it. He did not create it to be empty, but formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahweh, and there is no other.
So this is not the only place, but it's one of the places where God basically puts up two things and compares them. And he says, if the earth ever ceases to exist, if the seasons ever stop, if the sun stops shining, then you will know that I have forsaken my nation of Israel. So he compares the whole planet to what he plans to do and the promises that he plans to keep with Israel. And we are likely going to be the generation that gets to see it. I'm very excited. I mean, there was Anna and Simon who were waiting around in the temple forever to see this baby Jesus come into the temple, and they finally got to see it. And what did they say when they finally saw him?
The salvation of the Lord.
This is the salvation of the Lord. Simon says, you can now shut the eyes of your servants, because I have seen your salvation. That was what they were waiting for. What they were living for was to see that happen. So he's saying there is no other God. I created the heavens and the earth, and Israel's going to be saved. And you can tell it from basically what he's done. The next one is equally as powerful, and it's also from that same chapter. I'm going to ask Helen, would you read that one?
I'll try. Whoops. Did you unmute
Nicholas,
me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Can you
Yes.
hear me? Oh,
Yes, we can hear
thank
you fine. Helen.
Isaiah 45:19. I have not spoken in secret somewhere in a land of darkness. I did not say to the descendants of Jacob, seek me in a white wasteland. I, Yahweh, speak truthfully. I say what is right. Come, gather together and draw near, you fugitives of the nations, those who carry their wooden idols and pray to the God who cannot save. Have no knowledge. Speak up and present your case. Yes, let them take counsel together, who predicted this long ago, who announced it from the ancient times. Oh, who announced it from the ancient times, question mark. Was it not I, Yahweh? There is no other God but me, a righteous God and Savior. There is no one except me. Turn to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth, for I am God and there is no other. By myself I have sworn, truth has gone from my mouth, a word that will not be revoked. Every knee will bow to me, every tongue will swear allegiance. It will be said to me, righteousness and strength is only in the Lord. All who are enraged against him will come to him and be put to shame. All the descendants of Israel will be justified and find glory through the Lord. That's it.
So it's just
Are you
so
there?
powerful all the way through here. He's telling them, yeah, we're right here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can anybody
Yes.
else hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Sorry.
we're hearing you.
Yes. We can hear you.
Yes, we all hear you. Okay, so I appreciate you reading all that, Helen. That was very good. There's so much in this that can be taken away, but he's saying, which I think is very interesting, come together, all you fugitives of the nations who worship other gods, can't save and don't have any knowledge. Present your case. You know, I'm the one who said it a long time ago that this is the way it was going to happen. There is no salvation except through me, through all the ends of the earth. And he's constantly revealing himself through mysteries to all those who are astray from him or have turned away, and to bring them back to him. And I really think that's why we're all change agents on this earth, is to turn people's hearts back to serving the Lord. I think that's the last slide. It is. So we are all done for the evening. I think it ended on. Oh, I hit my own slide. That's why. That's one. Okay, that's the end of it. All right. So thank you guys so much for participating, because we've been doing this for about, let me see, 7 weeks, I think, or 8 weeks, about as long as the pandemic itself. So next week we'll start something new, and I appreciate you all being here. Walter, would you like to close us with prayer?
Our dear, kind, and merciful Heavenly Father, truly we acknowledge that it is in you that we live and move and have our being. For without you, we are but the dust of the earth, to be spread upon the face of the earth and never heard from again. But you've shown your love for us, and that you have given us a means that we might have life and have it more abundantly. We thank you for thy Son and the covenant you've established with us, for the insights these classes have brought to us about how we can think more about how you think about things, and how we can try to bring our hearts and minds more in line with you by studying your Son and the things he's done. We thank you for the peace and safety you bring into our lives, and look forward to that day soon that we might all meet together again, if not here, certainly in that most wonderful kingdom that we so long for. We thank you for the many blessings of life, the ones we can see daily and those that you do that we have no understanding of. We're thankful for you in our lives. We pray for your guidance and directions for that soon coming of thy Son. Thank you for all these things. In the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you all. It was good seeing you again. I hope you have a good night, and we'll start something new next week. So hope everybody's staying safe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Good night.